Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Dr. Andrea Bishop. I direct the Center for Leadership and Development at Harding University, and I'm so glad that you're here. This is our fourth and final webinar for our spring series on the topic of leadership storytelling. The webinars in this series have been really fun, but I have also learned a lot from my colleagues, and if you've been in any of those, I hope you've learned a lot as well. Today, our storyteller is one of my favorite people and definitely one of my favorite coworkers. Dr. Clay Beeson is the chair of graduate studies in Harding's College of Education. He directs the Master of Arts Excellence in Teaching program. He does so much behind the scenes, and he's had some really cool jobs in his tenure at Harding, including directing. I mean, this must have been so hard for you, Clay. Directing Hug, Harding University in Greece. I mean, I don't know how you did that one. That one was tough.
They
Um,
beat our arm on that one.
yeah, I bet they did. Yes. Clay is an incredible leader, a skilled coach, and lucky for us, he is also a really good storyteller. Clay, thank you for saying yes when I came knocking last fall. I'm really happy about this one. I had so much fun preparing for it with you. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Well, why don't we get started? Tell us why travel is so important to you.
Well, I think travel is intriguing to a lot of people. And, I grew up traveling with my family. I grew up outside of Dallas, and my mom had grown up outside of Dallas, and my dad from Missouri and New Mexico. So most of our travel, though, was west. And so, my idea of traveling abroad, at least growing up, was getting out of the state of Texas.
Yeah.
Uh, we would go and I have a lot of fond memories of hiking and fishing and camping in New Mexico and Colorado. I had an uncle, still do, in Montana. Had a grandmother that lived in California. So we always went west. Um, when I was a student at Harding, I really didn't think much about traveling abroad, at least, because I was playing football and I just didn't know much about traveling abroad. And so really, I didn't think about going to Hug or Huff, which were the only two programs at that time. But then when I started to work for Harding in 2000, my wife, Lauren, said, "Hey, we should sign up for one of the programs." And so we were fortunate enough to get to be the visiting faculty at Huff in the summer of 2007. And that just changed our perspective on at least international travel.
Mm.
And we had a wonderful group of 40 students. Fell in love with the beauty, the culture, the language, the food. Robbie and Mona Shackelford did a great job. And so when we got back from that, we said, how can we share this with more people, and how can we get involved more? And so a few years later, I was coaching football, and Lauren and I started the BAT program, Bison Athletes in Training. And so this was a program designed for athletes where we would take them abroad and they would work out as we traveled and learned. And so we did that starting in 2011. We did that every odd summer until 2023. And we started off the program in Italy, and then we would go to Germany, where we would meet up with Dr. J.R. Duke, who was living in Germany at the time, and he would tour our group there. And then eventually we involved Greece as well. And then summer 2012, we were able to be the visiting faculty at Hug. And 2 years later, when that director position came available, the dean of international programs at the time, Dr. Jeff Hopper, asked Lauren and I if we would apply for that. And so kind of the rest is history. We moved to Greece in January of 2015. Me and Lauren and our daughter, who was in the middle of her sixth grade year at the time, and our dog moved. And one of the things that I remember most about our time abroad was when we would get to a new city. It doesn't matter if it was Jerusalem or Istanbul or Rome or Athens. I would ask the students to raise their hands if their parents had ever been to that particular city. And I was always amazed with how few of hands went up.
Mm.
So I would tell the students, okay, you need to thank your parents for allowing you to do something that they themselves haven't even done yet. And so when we got back, finished our time at Hug, we got back in 2019. I said, basically, parents, okay, it's your turn. It's your turn to do a miniature study abroad program. And so we planned our first trip to take adults in the summer of 2020. Of course, COVID hits, and we don't get to do that first trip until November of 21. But that's kind of where it all started.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Audience, I'm going to put a slide up for us to look at. And I want us to all be thinking about these ideas over the next 30, 40 minutes or so while Clay is speaking. These are the lessons that he's going to be talking about. So I want us to all be listening for them so we can hear them and identify them as he tells stories. So the top four are do your homework, remember to rest, look ahead, and monitor and adjust. Does that sound right, Clay?
We'll make those work for sure. Yes.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Well, Clay, let's go with this. Leadership and travel, at first glance, those may not sound like they really go together. So explain that to us.
All right. Well, I'll as we progress, you'll see that I'm telling a couple stories and then also maybe less story and just some points. But you learn when you travel. You research before you learn while you're on site. You research when you come back afterwards because you want to connect some dots. And so whenever I go to a location, I like to know the major events that happen there, the major players in that, the people, the leaders. And so, for instance, if we're taking a group to Normandy, then we're going to study some leaders like Major Richard Winters, Dick Winters. If you've watched the series Band of Brothers or read the book, he's the guy who was in the 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. And so we will study his leadership style, his communication skills, and things of that nature. If we're going to Greece, then we're going to study the Apostle Paul. I mean, he traveled an extensive bit. He had obstacles to overcome. He made negotiations. He made sacrifices, and so we'll study the Apostle Paul. But one of the stories that I'll elaborate on just a little bit more is a person that I came across, I believe, last year as I was preparing to take a group to Normandy. And it's a guy by the name of Lieutenant General William K. Harrison. And I had never heard of Harrison before last year. And so, again, as you prepare for things like this, you learn. And I'll tell you a little bit about Lieutenant General William K. Harrison. He was the most decorated soldier in the 30th Infantry Division, which, if you know anything about that division, it's what General Eisenhower identified as the best infantry division in World War II. He was the first ally to enter Belgium, getting ready for the Battle of the Bulge, and he received just about every decoration of valor that there is. He was so highly thought of that years later, he served as Chief of Staff in the United Nations when the Korean War began, and then President Eisenhower picked him to lead the negotiations to end that war. And everyone thought highly of his character, of his self-control. But if you back up 15 years from that, in the late 1930s, he was a cadet at West Point. And he was 20 years old, and he began the practice of reading through the Old Testament once a year and the New Testament 4 times per year. And he was able to do this even through war. He might not be able to read every single day, but there was periods of respite, and he was able to catch up so that at the end of the war, he was right on track. So fast forward 70 years from that, he's 90 years old. His eyesight's starting to fail him just a little bit, but at that point, he had read, as you see on the screen, the Old Testament through 70 times and the New Testament through 280 times. And people would ask him, why do you do this? And how do you do this? And he would say things like, well, I want every thought that enters my mind, every word that comes out of my mouth, every decision that I make, I want it to be funneled through the word. And we're reading through the Bible at Downtown Church, where my family attends this year, and it's stories like this that motivate me to want to stay up to date
Mm.
with the reading. And when they asked him, how could you do it? How did you have time to do that? He said, we all have the same amount of time in the day, and how we prioritize things uh, is how we get things done. And so, nobody's probably busier than Lieutenant General, and he was able to keep up with that practice. And so I think um, the application as a leader with all of this is be prepared, do your homework, investigate, be in the Word, explore. And sometimes exploring might mean slowing down and traveling with intention and purpose, connecting at a deeper level, traveling beyond destinations. And if I
Mm.
didn't travel, I might not have come across Lieutenant General William K. Harrison.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I think I've shared this with you, Clay, but my first real travel experience as an Oklahoma girl who didn't get on an airplane until she was 18 was to the United Kingdom with Harding in England in 1995. I was 20 years old. Please do not do the math. I would like for you to think I'm 35. That trip, it changed the trajectory of my life. That experience, I mean, it really did. It made me who I am today, and I was unprepared for that, I guess is my point. But it wasn't necessarily the places that we went, it was those moments in between, and it was those quiet times, and it was sitting in places I never could dream that I would be. Those were those life-changing experiences. So I love that you're talking a little bit about slowing down. Um, can we go on with that? Can we follow up with a little bit more slowing down idea?
Well, I don't know if anybody's read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's by John Mark Comer. So, summer of 2020, we were supposed to take our first adult group to Greece. Well, COVID hits, and so instead, I'm sitting on the back porch reading this book. But I'm so glad I did. I mean, there's a line that Comer says that really stands out, and it is, wisdom is born in the quiet and in the slow. And I've already mentioned the Apostle Paul. I mean, he traveled a good bit, but he also spent 3 years in Arabia. And this after his conversion, and I just am confident that he was rechecking, he was studying, he was praying, he's meditating, he's asking, is this the Messiah that we've been waiting on? Um, when in our schedules, when we take groups, our itinerary, you don't have to be so rigid all the time. Um, we're going to have the major things that we definitely are going to see for sure. But my good friend Dr. Todd Patton says we still need to have time for happy surprises. Okay, a happy surprise is something that's not built into the itinerary. You don't even know it's going to happen, but you have enough free time, and you encourage people to explore and to interact with the locals, and something might come out of that that might be the best experience of the entire trip. Um, on our trips to Greece, which again, Dr. Patton helps me with that, but um, he'll introduce a word of the day each day. And so it's words like intentional and slow and beauty, hospitality, maximum, safety, explore. And we'll share a thought about it, and we'll talk about it at the end of the day too. And how did they experience this? Even the idea of less is more. And I'm reading a book right now called Praying Like Monks, Living Like Fools. And this morning I'm listening to this on Audible as I'm going around our neighborhood walking. And the author talks about in Psalms how David, when he wrote, be still, And he's a very busy king, but he's still writing, be still. Well, the author of this book says that the Latin word for still is vacate. And we get our English word vacation from this. And I looked it up. I don't know if that's the exact translation, but it does have to do with taking your time. And I'll tell you a story about how and I say we, Todd Patton and Luke Cullins and I use the word maximum. And I've shared this with some others too, but in the summer of 2021, the three of us were invited to go and visit with our good friend James. His Greek name is Yakovos Nikolopoulos. Okay, Yak at the very first sounds like Jack, so that'll come in just a minute. But we're invited to James's house, and he lives about 50 miles south of ancient Olympia, a little village called Philiatra. And as we get there in the afternoon, they show us into this house right here, which was a family member that was away at the time. So we were going to be able to use this little house for a few days, got that front porch on it. And so we get settled in. First of all, I love to tell a lot of details and stories. And I'm going to try to cut to the chase here. But if you want to hear the Paul Harvey rest of the story, then you can get with me later on. But the short story is we get settled in, we go and have our first meal underneath the awning of their house. I think we had stuffed bell pepper that night with mincemeat and some different vegetables, but just kind of getting to know each other and introductions for some, because I know at least Luke had not been there, and Todd had not been introduced to James's parents. And so we're getting to know each other a little bit, and we go back. We're still a little bit jet lagged, so we go to bed early. They send with us, of course, homemade bread and some jams and some fruit, things for the next morning. So we go to sleep, we get up, we have a leisurely morning on that front porch there, with those chairs overlooking the Ionian Sea. We've got the breeze coming off, and a little bit later, James and his wife, Jill. So there we go, Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill come over with their baby, and we're laughing, we're playing with the baby, and then his two older kids come over, and we go to the beach. All right, so we're at the beach, we have a good time, come back, we go, and after we clean up, we have our lunch meal, and our lunch meal is the plate that you see at the top there, and I'm going to hold that for just a second. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that meal in just a moment. But after that meal, we go, we take a nap. Then we wake up, we go to the beach a second time. And it's really like a private carved out of the rock beach where the salt water is feeding that water. So it's like a swimming pool, but it's salt water of the sea. But we do that, and we come and have our last meal together before we leave the next morning. Of course, we just have vegetables that night because we've had such a big lunch that you can see there. And the next morning we go off. We're going to northern Greece. The three of us, Todd and Luke and I, are going to northern Greece. They sent us off with a loaf of fresh bread and a whole bunch of olive oil, something to snack on the way. So let me come back to this lunch meal. We are having this meal in the middle of 1,000-tree olive grove, and it's July the 4th, and we're outside, and it's not hot, and we're not swatting mosquitoes. And we're all at the table, and James and Jill are telling us the story of how they met and got married. And Andreas and Christina, James's mom and dad, are telling us the story of how they met and got married. And Andreas, he's this really handsome Greek man, salt and pepper hair, beard, big booming voice, sweet. And even though he has a little bit of broken English, he's telling the story about how, as a member of the Navy, he sailed the Ionian and the Adriatic seas, and he went over the Apennine Mountains and found his treasure. Okay, because James's mom is from Bologna, Italy, and he brought her back. He found his treasure and he brought her back. And as we're having this meal and sharing, we're telling how we met our wives. You just look over at Andreas, and he's just booming and beaming with joy. He's so happy. And every once in a while, his wife will walk by and maybe she's getting some more drinks or dessert, and she'll squeeze his shoulder and they'll look up at each other, and they don't say any words, but they are communicating everything. They are communicating, this is maximum. This is the life we dreamed about. And his dad would say, Americans want to come over here to Greece and go to the beaches and go to the Acropolis and go to ancient Olympia. And he goes, and that's all great. And the Greeks, they want to go to the US and they want to go to New York City and Los Angeles and Dallas, and that's all great. He goes, but I want to be right here. I am living maximum, which was our takeaway from that trip. I mean, we kept saying the word over and over, maximum. And Todd actually referred to that weekend as the perfect Sabbath. And so we get back from this trip after we go to northern Greece, and Todd, who had already been communicating some with James, sends this email. All right, so I want to read this email to you. So this is Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. Todd's writing, James, I cannot say thank you enough for hosting us. I was touched deeply by that visit and have learned a few lessons about hospitality from you and your family. I also felt as if I truly experienced a Sabbath. Thank you for opening your home and giving your time like that. I know you were between trips and things were busy for you. The meals at your house were amazing and I loved the food, but seeing your family enjoy each other's company was the real feast. Thanks for sharing. Your dad summed it up one night when he told us he was living maximum. I have to agree, and I hear his voice. You are a blessed man. I am blessed to know you and to have shared time with you. I went back to Philippi because I told you we left this trip and I left his house and went to northern Greece. He goes, I went to Philippi and found the Primus Pilos. This is an inscription there that we love to talk about because it has to do with the Roman army. Anyway, and he took some pictures. I'll write up a little thought and story and send it to you. I hope you had a good time in Thessaloniki because he was getting ready to go to a wedding there, James was. I am full and inspired by my trip to your homeland. It was amazing. And we saw a bear too. We left their house. We saw a bear on our way to northern Greece. There's a big story there. Thanks again, and I hope to visit with you soon. Your brother, friend, and fellow servant, Todd. P.S. I didn't write down the instructions your dad gave me for grilling the pork steaks. I could use those again. If you have time, send me that procedure. I have an idea, but the more I know, the better, because I'm certain, even with the recipe, I won't be able to duplicate the art of the master. If I get it close, it'll still remind me of my time there. Maximum. So a few days later, James responded to Todd. This is July 16, 2021. Dear Todd, it was an honor and blessing having you here these days. My family and I truly enjoyed our time together. My parents in particular were touched by your kindness and sweetness. We were all reminded that there are brothers and sisters all around the world who hear and obey the same King. What a great fellowship it was. I was right there when my dad told you about living life to the maximum. I agree, even though I often forget it. We hope to see you again soon. Next time, bring the family with you. The day we traveled to Thessaloniki for the wedding, we drove through the same roads that you did. We didn't see any bears. I have been traveling in the area as a guide for 18 years and I have not seen one. Ha ha. I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts about the Primus Pilos at Philippi. I once applied the use and function of the Roman weaponry on what Paul writes about the armor of God, and what came out of it was overwhelming. I am sure there is a lot to learn by digging into the Roman army and combining it with the New Testament. The wedding was really nice. It was low key and like a big family reunion. But after 4 days, I don't know if anybody's seen my Big Fat Greek Wedding, but after 4 days, we were ready to go home. So 701.10 kilometers later, we were back. And yesterday we added a day trip to Athens to declare the birth of Elizabeth, that was their youngest daughter, new baby, at the U.S. Embassy. So she is officially a citizen now. I asked my dad about the grilling instructions, And he said that that information is given orally only, which means you have to come back to hear it again. Love in Christ, James. P.S. This is what gets me every time. All right, P.S. Then he gave me the instructions in 9 steps. Number 1, love. Number 2, good quality of meat. Number 3, stable but not intense fire. Number 4, the preparation of the meat. The night before, apply with brush some olive oil and leave the steaks in the company of garlic and rosemary. No salt. I love that phrase. Leave them in the company of garlic and rosemary. Number 5, when the steaks on the fire start sweating, I'm writing it the way he said it. This is what James says. Add coarse salt. Number 6, flip them only a few times. Number 7, when you take them from the fire, put them in a metallic container like a casserole pot and keep them covered. Apply a lot of olive oil and lemon that you can mix beforehand. Number 8, leave them on the fire like this for a few minutes. Number 9, they are ready. All that is needed now is an open heart and good company. And I'm telling you, that was hospitality at its finest. And
Yes.
I take the application from that as a leader. Take a Sabbath,
Mm.
rest. I mean, if you're an athlete that's working out and you work out your muscles to maximize them, you've got to rest. As leaders, we got to rest. Sometimes that means simplifying. Sometimes it means, and I think this means all the time, own a part of your day and protect it.
Mm.
Less can be more. And I think that all of us, with our colleagues, with the people that report to us or that we report to, with our families, with our friends, we can live life to the maximum, even right in our hometown or on our back porch. I mean, you don't have to travel around the world to live maximum.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those letters with us and for that beautiful story. I don't even like I'm still trying to process it. It reminds me of letters from Paul, like in the Bible. It's what it reminds me of. It has that feel to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm supposed to be in charge of transitions and you've completely messed me up because it was so good.
Let me say this. So one of my favorite memories of our time in Greece was one time that Lauren and Ann Clayton and I went to spend a weekend with James and his family. And we're out there. I've got my Bible out, English Bible, of course. And James's dad, Andreas, has his Greek Bible out. And James is the translator going back and forth. And I'm reading something and I'm reading it in English. And James will talk with his dad in Greek for just a moment. He'll say, really, it does mean that, but it means so much more than what we read in English sometimes. And he just puts it in a poetic way, and it's like, oh my goodness,
Yes.
we all understood Greek, the original language. So sorry to throw you off
Yes.
there, but that's what it reminded me of when you said that.
Yes, definitely. Okay, back to our preparation and conversations. You told me about the sweetest little couple that has traveled with you more than once. Can you tell our guests about that?
Sure. And this is not really a story, and it's short for the most part, but I think having a trip in the future gives someone something to look forward to. All right, it excites you, it motivates you, and so let me introduce you to Mr. Herkey and Mrs. Gale. Last year, they're on the left there. They went with me to, you can see that we're in France. And as part of this tour, first of all, let me say Mr. Herkey on the left last year was 86 and Miss Gale was 87. All right. And part of our trip, first of all, Mr. Herkey, who's also in the right picture bending over, we had a wreath laying ceremony at the Normandy Cemetery, and he's a Navy vet, and his brother-in-law there, John, is a Vietnam Army veteran. So that's what those two folks are doing. But we were in Mont Saint Michel, and if you know anything about that, Mont Saint Michel has a monastery at the very top of this island. The only way to get up there is to climb. And so as we went there as a group, I said, look, we do not have to do this. Some of us can do it. All of us can do it. None of us can do it. But they all wanted to do it, of course. And so as we're slowly making our way up, and we're taking our time and resting every once in a while, admiring the beauty below. But one time we stopped for one of our little rest breaks, and Miss Gail said to me, and she's breathing hard, I'm breathing hard, we're all breathing hard. She said, Clay, you're going to put an age limit on these trips in the future, aren't you? I said, yes, Miss Gail, I am 99 years old. And we laughed at that. And, we made it all the way up to the top. We got back down and had a wonderful trip. And then this last fall, I mentioned to them about the Greece tour, and they reached out and said, we would like to do this. So this summer, she'll be 88, he'll be 87. And just last week, I texted Mr. Herkey about something that was not necessarily timely, but I texted him at, say, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't get a response from him until about 3 hours later. And his response before he answered my question was, sorry about not getting back to you quickly. I was at exercise trying to get fit for the trip. And I thought, that is so healthy. I mean, regardless of our age, mind, body, and soul all work in union. They work in they
Mm,
support each other. And so I think the application as leaders is sometimes we just have to treat ourselves. We've got to have self-care. If we're going to take care of others, we got to take care of ourselves. And having positive activities on the calendar to look forward to can definitely motivate us. So I encourage us all to always have a ticket somewhere.
I love that. Also, I probably speak for everyone on this call when I say I want to be Mr. Herky and Miss Gale when I grow up. I mean, what a life. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, as you were talking about that, it made me realize we didn't put this on our list of takeaways, but it reminds me of another key leadership trait that we really want to see in our leaders, and that's curiosity. Curiosity is imperative for good leadership. It's one of the things we talk about the most in our master's degree program is remaining curious, remaining open to new ideas and really inviting those. And I see that trait in that story. I love that. Thank you. Audience, if you have a question for Clay, this would be a great time to put it in the chat. We are going to start transitioning towards the end. You cannot leave yet. We're not done yet. But this is a good time for your questions. And while you are doing that, Clay, I think you do have maybe one more story for us. Could you set that up?
Yes. And it's not necessarily a story, but it's a point. And I'll tell you about
Okay.
the mystery tour.
Ooh.
Yes. So last summer, and I talked about it with several before, but just said, you know what, I'm gonna create a mystery tour and see what happens. And so I put something on Facebook and I said, I need 8 people to trust me. You're gonna trust me with an itinerary that you don't know. And so I got 8 people, and I sent them a Google form, and basically I asked them, where have you been in Europe? Where would you like to go in Europe? Would you do this activity, this activity, this activity? And I took all that information and I created an itinerary. And they still don't know the itinerary. And so what I have noticed throughout this process from that point back last summer to we're actually getting ready to leave in a couple of weeks is you have to have great communication. You have to instill trust. There does need to be some creativity. They're kind of thinking of it like an amazing race vibe, so to speak. Decision making, innovation, courage. You mentioned curiosity just a few moments ago. I think you have to take some risks sometimes as a leader, and sometimes that might be a bust. You've got to be brave. I took a chance on something new. It happened to fill up in an hour. It could have been had no interest, but it is going to be a tour full of happy surprises. It reminds me too of a time when Todd Patton and I were in Greece. We had just finished with the group and we got a rental car, and we had seen something about a monastery outside of Corinth, Greece. And so we drove over there and we put the monastery in our GPS, and we're following that. We've got just a small vehicle. I mean, it's definitely not a four-wheel drive. And that Google Maps is telling us, okay, get off on this side road. And then we get off on a smaller road. And then pretty soon we're on a dirt road. And then pretty soon we're going through an olive grove. And we're both thinking, there is no way that this is the way to get to that monastery. I mean, we're going through washed out roads. We don't know if we're going to make it. We're going to get stuck. But finally, we see this monastery in the distance. Now it's high up on a mountain, and it's still a long, long ways from us. And as we drive, we finally realize, first of all, we're like, once we get to the base of that mountain, how are we going to get up to the monastery? Okay. We don't know the answer to that. Well, it reminds me, I'm going to take a pause there for just a second. It reminds me of Brunelleschi. All right. So Brunelleschi is the guy in charge of the architect of the Duomo in Florence, Italy. This church, this cathedral had sat without its dome on top for over 100 years. They couldn't figure out how to create a dome, build a dome over that great of an expanse. Once he won the commission based on his idea, and he has to build this dome where it supports itself all the way up without scaffolding below. But the question to him was, okay, once you get to the very top and you have to put the finishing lantern on it, how are you going to do that? And Brunelleschi, I mean, he relied on his understanding of mechanics and his ability to invent tools and techniques. He relied on those things more than on existing architectural knowledge. I mean, he was unconventional. He was a problem solver. And he basically said, I don't know how I'm going to build that when I get there, but I'll know when I get there. And his phrase was, in building, only practical experience will teach that which is to be followed. And I think as leaders, we may not know where we're going to be in a year, but we'll know when we get there. For Todd and I on this trip trying to find this monastery, we didn't know how we were going to get up to the top of the mountain, but we figured we would know when we got there. Now, I'm sorry to say, we did not find the monastery. We didn't get to the base, but we will one of these days. We're going back, and we will find that. And I think the application to leaders is all this mystery trip or leading people into the unknown. Okay. Accountability, vision, confidence, flexibility, motivation. You got to develop trust. You got to explore. You mentioned monitoring and adjusting. I mean, on a trip to Europe, you don't control things when there's a strike. You just have to adjust. I think on a trip like this, you eat what you're served, even if it's not what you ordered. I mean, there's a lot of times we'll be in Greece and someone will order a gyro with no tomatoes. All right. Well, the waiter will bring it and it'll have tomatoes. And sometimes the people will send it back. And I'm like, can you not just take the tomatoes off or just eat the tomatoes? Eat it with the tomatoes. I mean, leaders should model, I don't have to get my way every time. I recently read an article about a college football coach that when he recruits quarterbacks and it has them on a recruiting visit to his school and he wants to take them out to eat, the coach will purposely call the restaurant ahead of time and ask that restaurant to bring that quarterback the wrong meal, because the coach wants to see how this potential leader of his team reacts to adversity. But really, leading, intentionality. Internationally, there's going to be language barriers. There's going to be unexpected weather, opportunities for happy surprises. Monitor and adjust. The more times you do something, the safer you feel.
Mm.
You take more chances. I mean, they've got to be calculated chances, of course, but you take more chances. And so I think once a leader develops trust with people, they will go with that person into the unknown. They'll go
Mm.
on a mission trip.
Yes, I would go on a mystery trip with you. I would trust you for that. Absolutely.
Let's
What a
go.
great idea. I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think that this is you and I have known each other for a while. Um, and I think probably preparing for this webinar and hearing your stories, thinking the stories you shared today, and then other things we've considered, I probably know you better now because of the stories than I did in the 3 years that we worked together before that. And I think that that's important for leadership as well. We really have to know the stories of the people that we are working alongside and the people who work for us. Because if we don't know their stories, we don't really know who they are, and we don't understand how they see the world. And if we don't understand that, how are we really effectively leading? So thank you for sharing your stories with us. And Clay has time for questions. So if anybody has one, please put it in the chat. And while we wait on that, looks like we have a minute or two. I have a story to share. Can I share my story?
Great. Yes, of course.
Yay. Okay. So earlier I mentioned my 1995 trip. Um, Harding University, I was heading into my junior year. I was 20 years old. Don't do the math. When I got on that plane, it was only the second time I had been on an airplane in my life. And at that time, as a 20-year-old, I knew exactly what I was going to do with my life. I was going to finish Harding and I was going to go straight to law school. I had my top 3 schools picked out. I had already started on applications. I was ready to go. That was the plan. And then I traveled and I saw things I did not know were out there. And while traveling, I figured out who I was. Figured out what lit me up inside, what I got excited about, what I didn't get excited about. And one of my favorite places, we went and saw amazing, amazing things throughout the UK. And this is going to make me sound like the most boring person on earth, but my favorite place was the British Museum. And we got to go to the British Museum, I don't know, dozens of times because we were stationed in London. That's where we were most of the trip. And I was a British Museum regular. And for those of you who've never been there, it is so large that you could probably go every day for a year and not see everything. It's huge. So I'd probably been 10 times or so before I even got to the middle of the museum and found the reading room. Do you know the reading room?
No.
No? Okay. So it was moved out in 1997. So I feel blessed that I got to be a part of it before that happened. But the reading room is this massive round room in the middle of the British Museum that is filled with books. You have never seen more books in your life. It's a grand, huge library, is what it was, with ancient texts, modern texts, everything. And the first time that I walked through the little entrance into that room, I mean, the only way that I can describe it is time literally stood still. Like it felt like everything stopped moving around me. And I'm going to get emotional talking about it. It was that moment where I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't actually know what I want to do, but it has something to do with this. It has
Yeah.
something to do with reading and writing and books and learning and curiosity and doing things that are different. And I don't know what that looks like. But now that I've traveled and I see I don't have to know what it looks like, I'm okay with that. And I wouldn't know it, but as I left that day, I said to myself, I'm going to do something with words. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to do something with words. And for those of you who don't know me, my PhD is in writing and rhetoric, which is words. That is exactly what that was. I didn't have the language for that at 20. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew what I wanted it to look like. And if I would not have gone to London in 1995, I might be a really miserable lawyer right now. That might be where I was. But instead, I'm doing something I absolutely love. And I get to teach people about the connections between language and leadership. And that's amazing. And travel taught me that. So thank you for letting me share that story. That was fun.
There's so much out there,
Yeah.
and the United States is so young compared to a lot of countries. And so
Mm,
when you go and you study the events that took place there, the people, the thoughts, I mean, it's Eastern culture too is a different thought process. Um, and so you just benefit by communicating with people, learning from others, humbling yourself to learn from others, and saying, "Hey,
mm,
there's another way to look at this stimulus." Uh,
yes.
and I think too, travel um, can give you so much confidence, especially as a young person. When there's some anxiety about traveling, it's a new language. Am I going to be able to get around and understand things? And you get there and you're able to navigate.
Yeah.
You say, "Hey, I can do this."
Right. Yes, absolutely. I mean, when we started talking about this as a topic, travel and leadership together, it made sense to me because leadership is life. I mean, we learn how to be leaders through life experiences, and travel also teaches us about life as well. I think my biggest takeaway from travel is that it's not the destination. And this sounds flippant, but I don't mean for it to be. It's what you do along the way that makes it meaningful. And I think a lot of times we forget that. We're all about the destination instead of maximizing those moments between now and when we get there. And that's also leadership. We cannot only be focused on goals, we have to celebrate the things in between as well.
You
Yes.
know, People a lot of times will say, "Should I go here or should I go here?" Maybe it's a European place, and usually the response is, "There's not a wrong answer." Probably the wrong thing to do is to try to do too much
Mm,
because don't you don't take your time to just sit and people watch and reflect on what you just experienced, to talk to the waiter, to the person at the museum, whatever it happens to be, and say, what do the locals do here? Let's get off the beaten path a little bit. Let's see the real
yes.
London or the real Athens or a small Greek village. And so that's a big part of travel. You said beyond destinations. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, we're going to places this summer that I can guarantee no one on the trip has heard of.
Yes.
And we're going to a place, Todd and I with the group from Greece, we're going to a place that we had not heard of a year ago. And then in our time after a group where we went back, we said, we got to bring people here every time.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great.
And I guarantee we won't see another traveler, another tourist when we're in that little Greek village either.
Yes, yes. I love that. Well, audience, as we have experienced today, a good story is always a good idea, especially when we are training and teaching and leading. I teach several classes in our master's program, and one of my favorite ones is what I call a training the trainer class. It is a foundational class for how people train adults in the workplace. And the theme for that class is storytelling. And it's not just stories themselves, but the way that stories work hand in hand with the way that our brain works as adults when we are learning. So, the neuroscience of adult learning supports fully the fact that adults learn through stories. So, the more stories we tell, the more adult learners learn. And that's something leaders need to know because telling people what to do is one way that we could do it, or we could share some stories and show what we're thinking. And that's actually a much more effective way of training and leading. Clay, thank you so much for sharing and showing what that looks like so beautifully today. It was really great. We do have one comment from Kathy Dillon. I love the idea that the mistake is in trying to do too much. Yes, greediness does not reward. And I mean, that is true. And I think sometimes when we're going on a trip like that, we feel like we have to do as much as we possibly can, or we're not getting our money's worth or something like that. Um, but that's not the case. We need to slow it down a little bit. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy.
You may get to the end of your trip and get back and be like, what did I just do? And you're looking at your pictures and you're saying, where was this? And you're asking who you went with, and like, I don't
Right.
remember that place.
Yes. 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 That is very true. Well, I'm
So,
going to start wrapping us up if that is okay. We've got a few more minutes, and I always love to leave a little early so we're not holding people over. That's also a leadership lesson, Clay Beeson. Did you know that? Yes.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, you did. We have ended our storytelling series of the webinars from this spring. It has been so fun. If this is your first one and you want to watch some of the others, you can email me at that email on the screen. I'm happy to share recordings with you. You can also earn our free micro credential. It's very easy to do and rewarding. So if you'd like to do that, let me know. And finally, I am really excited. You're the first people to see the preview of what we're going to do in the academic year 25-26 in the fall. Our webinar series is going to focus on coaching conversations. And I'm really excited about that. We're going to talk about how a coaching conversation, as in workplace coaching, can teach us all kinds of things, including learning from our mistakes, how to grow out of one thing and into another, work-life balance. Anyone who struggles with that's a good topic. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what it means to coach teams or what it means to work with teams. So that's going to be really rich in the fall. And then in the spring, we're going to have this lovely series called Faith at Work that I'm so excited about. And we're just going to focus those conversations on what it looks like to take our faith into our workplaces and live like Jesus wants us to live in those spaces. Really excited about that. There will be more information coming towards the end of the summer, early August. So be looking for that and sign up when you see it. Clay, again, thank you so much. Audience, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. We appreciate you supporting these webinars and supporting Clay as he tells stories for us today. Thank you. We hope you have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.